Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar between Thrive and Macronet. I'm your host, Gary Sloper at Macronet, and I wanted to introduce Michael Gray, Chief Technology Officer at Thrive, and Chip Gibbons, Chief Security Officer at Thrive. And we're really excited to partner with Thrive today. They're one of our strategic partners here in the United States. We work with them across a slew of services from managed IT to cloud migration and other services. And today we really want to talk a little bit about how ServiceNow and SIEM kind of work together. And I'm honored to be, here with these two fine gentlemen who are, stalwarts in the industry, have done a lot around these topics. And I think, you as a listener today should get a lot out of this. And I think what's interesting is that there's still this shift. And if you look at what Gartner and some of the other analysts have talked about specifically within, the SIEM industry and kind of where this migration is moving. It's very interesting, but it's also, going at leaps and bounds. So you're gonna see a lot of information today. We're gonna walk through some of the basics. We're gonna go through a demo and kind of go from there. So, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Gary. And, thank you and Macronet for putting this together. I think when we first started chatting about this webinar a couple of months ago, we realize there's a lot here to talk about. So we're going to take some fairly complicated topics and just boil them down a little bit. So if you don't know a lot about cybersecurity or ServiceNow, which is another big topic we're going to discuss, this is where we can get you started. So at least you have an understanding of some of this environment and how Thrive and Macronet can help you as well. And we hope that you enjoy the demo that Chip and I are going to put on for you here. I've certainly done it quite a few times. And again, just thank you so much for having us here. Chip, why don't you say hello to everybody and why don't you give an idea of some of the services that you provide to our customers?
Great, thank you very much, Mike. So I'm Chip Gibbons. I'm the CISO here at Thrive, and we provide security services for our clients that range from everything from security awareness training all the way up to managed SIEM and SOC services. And we try to do pretty much everything in between to try to keep both Thrive secure as well as our clients secure, because as we all know, the world doesn't seem to be getting any safer from hackers. So we try to keep on top of it and stay one step ahead of them.
Now, Chip, who has got security 100% handled? Is there any customers out there you've seen that has no security problems?
There's, if anybody tells you they have no security problems, they're sadly wrong. What we always think is at some point you will get hacked, or you're already hacked and you just don't know it. So we always try to create layers of security to make sure that we can catch somebody or catch whatever might be happening before it actually affects your business.
Yeah, everybody's struggling. So everybody needs a little help, and we certainly understand that. Gary, can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing just from the folks that you work with and maybe some of their challenges or maybe even where they're succeeding on the security side?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. So we work with a lot of companies globally, ranging from most major verticals. I'd say with the exception of the federal government, they have their own kind of focus. But what we're seeing, I think traditionally on the security side is exactly what you're mentioning, that it's the constant looking over my shoulder to ensure that I have locked everything down. And what we're finding is that even, down at the business level, a lot of organizations feel that they've done as much as they can, but they don't realize sometimes the internal threats they have, not on purpose, just, through, informal malice that happens, by an employee or an ex-employee. I also think that we're seeing a large shift into web application firewall services, so bot mitigation, device fingerprinting, and that's such. And that's really driven by, the additional applications moving to the cloud. So if you get into a multi-cloud environment, having that agnostic protection, we're seeing quite a bit of that. But we're also seeing those customers that, are continuing to focus on on-premise services as well. I saw a funny meme, and we should probably put this in at the end, but it was showing a CISO that said, I'm not gonna pay the $50,000 for a pen test, but I'll pay the $400,000 for the ransomware request that I got because I was breached. And I think what we're seeing, now is more and more organizations are taking it very seriously, that they have to look in every single avenue of their business, even if they don't believe that it exists. So I'm sure it's very similar to what you're seeing at Thrive.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I think you're onto something. Maybe each of us could pick a good security meme to put at the end, because I got a few that popped into my head as soon as you mentioned it. So everybody loves a good meme, right? So yeah, no, absolutely. So let me just jump in a little bit deeper on our topics here. So what we really want to talk about, as I mentioned earlier in the intro, is two sort of complicated topics, right? So, you know, managed SIEM as a service from Thrive, it's really more about our managed security platform. And it's not so much about Thrive per se, it's about the cybersecurity industry and how complicated some of this technology can be, and complicated to get right. You know, it's not just something where you can write a large check and the problem is solved. It's pretty interesting. In fact, that can be one of the worst things you can do. You really need to understand where you can put some controls in. And then the other topic we'd like to jump into is ServiceNow, and we're going to bring those two together. Now, we're going to drill in on these two topics when it comes to these other slides here. But, you know, guys, I think that, you know, there is a lot of people hunting for solutions and maybe chasing a brand name as opposed to figuring out what the right consultative approach is. Do you guys agree?
Most definitely. There's a lot of times you have the you know, people looking for either solutions that are not a problem, or they're looking at only one specific thing that is just brand name, and doesn't really solve their problem that they're looking to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes folks are looking for the brand name, but then when they see the brand price, they want something much less. And so I think it's a fine balance at the same time.
And I like to think that, you know, security and, you know, digital transformation, which is a topic that comes up a lot, maybe a little bit overused, well, maybe a lot overused. You know, these buzzwords, you know, that people are sort of hunting, like you really need to have a business conversation. How is security impacting my business? And, you know, I don't actually look at it as an IT function. I look at cybersecurity as a business unit, just like you would look at finance. Right? You know, you have risks, you have some opportunities. You know, we are actually finding some folks who, instead of running from security problems, are running towards them. And they're basically going back to their customers and saying, yeah, I have better security than my competitors, regardless of what industry they're in. And, you know, it's turning into a differentiator for them. So definitely an interesting topic to dive into, even if you're not exactly a cybersecurity expert.
And Mike, I wanted to chime in on that one. We have more and more conversations with our clients now about risk. And in the past, risk wasn't really a discussion point. It was just, I either have 0 risk or I have 100% risk and I need to fix it, right? Now there's a lot of gray area that people didn't understand before. And those conversations are starting to come out, which is really important and really does help people become more secure.
Absolutely. All right, so we're ready to dive into. We've spent a lot of time in security here. We're gonna do ServiceNow first. You guys ready to dive in? There's gonna be some overwhelming slides, so take a deep breath. All right, so just very simply at the very beginning, I went and looked for how ServiceNow defines their service. There's a lot of people talking about it. Their stock price is like a rocket ship right now, if you've taken a look at it. But a lot of people don't really realize what it can do for their business and what it does. You know, so their definition here: unstructured work patterns into intelligent and automated workflows. Okay, that sounds good. That sounds like something that I want for my business. And typically, ServiceNow was a very large enterprise tool, and in many ways, it still is, right? But what we're trying to do is take our knowledge of ServiceNow and really our instance of ServiceNow and bring it down market and plug it in where it can really help people be more efficient and more streamlined. Now, today we're specifically talking about ServiceNow plus security. So I'm going to spend some more time on that. But before we get going on this next step, Gary, you and I talked about ServiceNow in the summer. You're hearing it pop up more and more as a topic for the folks that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of these organizations are trying to figure out how best to assimilate everything that's coming into their workflow on a regular basis. And so as teams are worked, harder with less amount of time and less resources, and now you add a lot of the situations that have occurred due to COVID, they really needed a more efficient way to kind of collapse a lot of these different, patterns and other things. And this is where we're starting to get a lot of inquiries around ServiceNow and kind of what we're seeing in the industry and who we partner with around this. So that's why I think this is a very timely discussion that we're having today.
Yeah, and I think ServiceNow as a topic is just as the topic itself and what it touches in people's businesses just as big as cybersecurity. If you decide to go into this world, there's very little areas in your business where it doesn't fit, believe it or not. So I want to try and make some sense of this. If I want to jump into what I would just consider a case study here. You guys ready to go?
Let's go.
Good.
All right. So a couple of months ago, we had a customer come to us and say, I want to transform my business and I want to put it into ServiceNow. And we asked them for their requirements. And the person that ran their operations team, and I'm not just talking about IT here, I'm talking about how this company's business runs, went to a whiteboard and drew this out. And it was interesting because we have developers on the phone, operations people on the phone, and in their office. This was pre-COVID. And somebody who ran the company literally just got up there and drew this out. And it was an interesting experience to see somebody literally write down how the engine of their business runs. And actually pretty cool at the same time. So we took this eye chart, as Gary put it earlier when I was showing it to him, and we mapped it all into ServiceNow. So whether it's our engineers helping out with an access request to Office 365, or their own internal business, something that they have, the support of their lab or something to that effect, they map that in as well. And we actually built all of this for them in ServiceNow, and we took what's here and turned it into this. So now someone that is monitoring all of their processes internally can now look at a dashboard and see where they are, whether it's a project or a work order to a vendor. We can put all this in one place. So, in probably 90 seconds or so, this is what ServiceNow can do for a business. And by the way, the company that I'm talking about, they probably have less than 200 employees. This is not a massive organization. And we were able to execute this, not only working with them, but they're also working in the platform completely on their own. So what do you guys think? Is something confusing like that turning into a dashboard? Is that the kind of conversations you're hearing about when it comes to ServiceNow?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that's the case. And even with some of the organizations that are going through various M&A, right? So they're taking in, potential technical debt from other organizations that they have to assimilate into their process, into their procurement system, to their ticketing system, whatever it might be. I think that's a challenge. And then, on the flip side, some of the more upstarts that are, traditionally SaaS-based, more cloud-native companies that have, are now on a Series B or Series C, they've started to grow. I'd kind of pose back and say, this is a huge opportunity for you to start to build now with ServiceNow versus waiting until you get to, that eye chart that we talked about earlier.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. The other thing I tell people too is that, having gone through this transformation ourselves, ServiceNow is a heavy lift, and there's a lot of information out there. If you do have ServiceNow questions, I would take a pause and actually ask somebody that's implemented it, just to give you some feedback on some of the use cases you might have. I think it would be very valuable because some people that head out to try and do ServiceNow on their own, very quickly start to realize, geez, I'm not even sure where to start. Maybe this isn't for me. But there are ways that you can get going that are not too complicated, or at least concepts that you can learn that will arm you on the journey. All right, so now that we dove in on ServiceNow and a very, very simple use case, let's transition to our next broad topic here, and that's cybersecurity. So much in the way that we looked up, what ServiceNow is, I thought it'd be kind of funny to look on Wikipedia to see what their definition of cybersecurity is. It actually took me to computer security. And again, much like the ServiceNow definition, this is, you sort of look at this, say, okay, I get it. I agree. Theft or damage to their systems, or disruption or misdirection of the services they provide. Yep. Everybody has that problem. Everybody has that worry. When you look at how complicated this can be, I actually want to show something that folks may have seen before, and that's called the entire attack framework or attack matrix. Chip, why don't you tell us a little bit about this eye chart?
So much like Mike's whiteboard picture from before, this is a complicated chart of what you can be attacked, from or how, right? So you see a bunch of different areas here. You can be, attacked from many different ways, doing many different things. And it can be complicated and almost disheartening to try to actually protect yourself from all these different attack methods. And so one of the things that Thrive does is try to make this a little more simple, I would want to say. So we don't have to, you're not looking at every single one of these things that you're trying to protect yourself from. We're trying to protect you from all of it, but in a more simple way.
Yeah, and I mean, it's some of these different controls, you wouldn't even know what they're talking about, whether or not you actually have protection from them. Gary, just on the business side of things, the people that Macronet works with, the customers that they consult with, what is the general approach or advice that you would have for, there's a security problem, but don't know all the details? Where do you sort of ask people to head as sort of a first step?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, sometimes you pull on that thread and it just keeps going. So I think the first step we try to take is understand, where they believe the issues exist. And if it's a network issue versus, an application security issue, those could have, obviously different implications, but also different resources that we need to leverage to help, with that discovery and remediation. I think the number one thing we have as the business discussion with any organization is, look, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when you'll have some sort of, attempted breach or even potentially a breach. So we know that you're doing everything possible to prevent those things. However, it's not a negative that we're involved. We're not here to go back and chastise on decisions or processes. Let's just fix the problem first. And I think oftentimes, outside of all the technology, you're still dealing with humans on the backside of the customer, and having that initial conversation to say, listen, just forget about everything else. Where do we start here? And then that, I believe, opens up a little bit better. Oftentimes we've been in situations where the customer is still trying to keep things close to the chest, even though they're having an issue. And you can't remediate a problem if you don't have access to everything, both, the human and intellectual capital.
Yeah, the human side, I mean, that's a really great point. I'm sort of thinking that, a lot of CFOs, and I'm looking at some of these terms here, if you go to a CFO and say, I need $60,000 for a WAF so I can protect us from DLL search order hijacking.
Right.
The CFO is gonna, hopefully you get to finish the sentence. But, you're not putting that in a term of risk and a business terms where a non-technical person or a non-security person can even understand it, right? So, again, not only is it overwhelming for the people that understand some of these terms, it can be overwhelming just from a general business standpoint.
Yeah, and my response to that, because that is a classic use case, I'm glad you brought that up. My response back to the finance or CFO organization is, if the IRS came out with new tax codes on a daily basis, would you have somebody hunting and preventing you from being out of compliance with the IRS tax codes? And the answer would be yes. So this is no different. It's just these people do not work. Well, I hope they don't work for the US government or your local government. They're out here to ruin your organization or steal items and intellectual property from your organization and do damage. So if you're willing to prevent, falling out of compliance with the United States tax code, you really should understand that this has bigger implications, because this is the real world. And oftentimes you kind of have to explain to that CFO, we can help build the watch, but your first issue is, how do you tell time, and then kind of work back. So it can be a challenge, but usually when I give that analogy, they're saying, okay, well, I guess I'll have to trust you on this one, because if the IRS was hitting me with a bunch of tax issues every day, I would put a team around that to make sure we're in compliance.
Well, Gary, I've never heard that analogy before. Chip, I'm guessing you haven't either, but I'm
I have
definitely
not.
I'm going to steal that one from you,
Yeah,
Gary.
go ahead.
Most
Go ahead.
definitely.
That's a perfect one. All right, so let's try and make some sense of this, just as far as breaking down these security services and just really security approaches more than anything else.
Now, this is good because it takes that other page and kind of breaks it down into areas that will help protect you as an organization. So, end user protection, everybody tries to think that if we put antivirus on a machine, then we're good to go and we don't really have any issues going forward. And we put a firewall in front of our office and then everybody's safe. But as we all know, many people are not working from the office today. We have to protect everybody at home. The area we see the most number of issues or incidents is humans clicking on emails, clicking on web links that they look legitimate, but they're not. And Thrive, as Gary mentioned before, we're not here to admonish you and tell you that this user did something wrong. I can get anybody to click a link. At some point, I've gotten everybody within Thrive to click a link because we try really hard to teach them not to. But if we don't give them good email testing ones, then they're gonna all think they're all easy to spot. So we don't do that. We do the same thing for our clients. We want to send them difficult phishing emails to try to get them to click links. Why? Because we want to teach them what is really going on out in the organization and out in the world today. So by utilizing Office 365 protection, by working on anti-phishing security awareness training, we put in advanced endpoint protection instead of just the standard AV that was out there 10 years ago with signatures. We try to put things that protect our end users, whether they're at home or in the office. But then as we go in the next section, we start talking, system patching, which if you talk to any IT person, that's when they kind of start looking to the ground. They start looking at the ceiling. They don't want to talk about patching at all because it's a miserable experience. Thrive actually built our business on patching because nobody wants to do it, and we do it really, really well. So that's where we start working on those areas. So Gary, do you hear, I'm assuming you also hear about patching as an issue. I know we do all the time. Is that something that you guys, your clients talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just having flashbacks to, Patch Tuesday out for Microsoft years ago where I could have used something like this because it's not glamorous, it's time consuming. We find that even on the voice over IP systems, which you wouldn't think about, oftentimes those, depending upon what they have, they're not necessarily completely patched and compliant there. So I think that's one of the easiest ways that a lot of vulnerabilities are exploited is because they haven't, completed patching, or conversely, they haven't necessarily looked at how that updated patch will impact their overall environment. And so again, it's not something people really get jazzed up about, but it is something that is so easy that gets overlooked and organizations that you would never expect. And sometimes it's the smaller organizations or the more niche organizations that are fully tight. So it is across the board. I do still see it, unfortunately.
It's definitely a belt and suspenders thing, right? The patching is probably the least interesting part of security and IT, but very critical. I think that patching is really more about vulnerability management. Part of it is the words that people use. People might not find it very interesting. There's a lot of hard work that goes on underneath the covers, a lot of tedious work. Chip, I know we've talked about this, a bunch of times. There's a lot of things in cybersecurity that, really aren't that attractive. They're very tedious, but they really make a difference, right? Going out there and doing threat hunting sounds cool, but you got to do the basics every day. You got to have that endpoint protection on every machine. You got to do your vulnerability management, and you got to have security monitoring there before you can kind of get to that sort of cooler, stuff that people might imagine that happens in a movie with a hacker, right?
Most definitely, and actually that's brings us up to the SIEM that we, a lot of people or IT engineers or whatnot, if they're within a company, they go, you know what I'm going to put in? I'm going to put a SIM because this thing's going to be awesome. I'm going to find all these great things. They put in the SIM, and the first day they get 100,000 alerts, and then they've never looked at it since because it's overwhelming, right? And this is we need to care and feed and make sure it's tuned correctly. That again, if you have 100,000 other things you're doing, making sure that the receptionist doesn't have, I don't know, malware on the machine, or because the monitor stops working, or you're running around doing the switches, updating firmware or whatnot. Well, you're not spending time looking at the SIM. You're not spending time working on the SIM and making sure that actually you're getting good alerts from it. And that's where, a lot of times a third party like Thrive really steps up and gives you access into an area that you normally wouldn't be able to do because you don't have the time, but then you have expertise on staff that you can rely upon. So you can say, okay, I'm not really sure what this alert's doing. Can you tell me what I should do? Or is it a false positive and I can move on? That's where, areas within the security realm really do help out our clients.
Well, I think to that point, Chip, what's interesting is because, we're all, here on the call seeing these use cases every week. A lot of these organizations, this is their first go at it, or they're replacing whatever their alert system existed before now with this, or potentially they're only doing it once. And so I think that muscle memory that, you guys can bring, so that way when you get onto the whiteboard, this is a standard use case that we're seeing many clients like yourself. Did you also think about these other 3 areas in your business? And it's like, no, we didn't think about that. We do need printer support. We do need to, make sure that we're adding new users to Office 365. Didn't even think about that. And that's where that muscle memory that I think you guys can bring to customers allows that implementation and the tuning to go much faster.
Most definitely.
All right, cool. All right, so you guys we want to dig in and see some of these tools or what?
It'll be fun.
Dig in.
All right, Chip, you ready to dig in and take a look at the SIM here? Now, this stuff's pretty overwhelming, so take me and Gary through it pretty slow, but I'm sure we'll stop and ask you questions along the way.
I hope you do. So we developed this SIM, and this is actually a FortiSIM, a Fortinet product, and we chose it because of a multiple different ways and reasons we did it. One of the reasons we really like it is because it is more holistic than many other SIMs out there. And I say that because we look at security, which I'm on the top left, and that's your standard IPS, IDS alerts, things like that you'd expect to get. We also look at performance.
Sorry, buddy. IPS, IDS. Help us out a little bit here.
Sorry, I'm back into my acronyms, aren't I? So intrusion prevention system, intrusion detection system. So a lot of times your firewall will throw out an alert saying, hey, this looks like abnormal or bad traffic. You might want to take a look into it. Now we take those alerts and we send them to this screen here so we can then dig into it and see what might be going on.
Got it.
Now, a lot of times if you don't have a SIM set up, which is security incident event management, so it basically takes all the logs from all your different devices and puts them into one spot. Now, if you don't have a spot to look at it, you're either getting emailed all these alerts throughout the day and night, or you just don't look at them, which was 99% of the people do. They just have these alerts going, they show up on the firewall itself, but they only hold 90 minutes worth and nobody really looks at them. So by putting them into a screen like this, we can then take a look at it, and we can look at them over a long period of time. Right now, I'm looking at it over 2 hours, but I can change this to whatever I want to be. I can go back days if I want to. And, let's say I might go back months. So it allows me to therefore see trends of what might be going on. So if there's normally, let's say 100 attacks a day against my firewall, and suddenly I see 1,000 attacks a day, something might be going on. I want to look into it. So
yeah, but the average IT person log in here and understand what to do. I mean, how do you find, I'm not saying that, we're the end all be all of security operators here, but how are most people sort of handling, and Gary, maybe you have some thoughts about, IT people trying to get into a system like this and work inside it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it depends on the organization. So I think there's some organizations where they have a limited IT staff and they see the alerts, they've, it's tuned or whatever, what have you, and they don't act on it enough because they don't have enough of the resources. So look at what is the most critical at that moment. So if they are seeing, inquiries coming into their firewall that doesn't look like it's something that should be happening, they'll dive into that. But they'll start to just kind of assess what I would say is their own risk score in their head based on what's coming off the screen. And I have witnessed times where they've missed things, right? Because they are human, they are, not going to be able to address everything. On the flip side, the more advanced organizations have clear set policies on who can kind of understand and make moves, adds, and changes against these scores coming in and some of the information coming in. So it really depends. I think the other challenge that you end up having is where things change so much, it's them understanding the real education of what the threat is, so I'll have some customers that'll say, yeah, I kind of try to keep up to date on OWASP. That's about it. Like, I don't really go outside of it because I don't have time. I'm putting out fires on a daily basis. And I think that's also a challenge. So there's no one like exact use case I see. It's kind of spread across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Gary, that's actually what we developed this for the multiple different users and the reason that they want to be able to do stuff. So we have some users that will never log into this, and that's fine. We get the alerts, we alert them if we see something abnormal. We either take action if we can, or we tell them what they should do for that action. Now, other clients, they like to see the data, and they might not be able to or don't have time to go into and manipulate the data often, but when they want to, they really want to. And that's, the mid-size organizations to large organizations that they have an IT person that, come around 9 o'clock at night, they might have an itch to go dig into the data that their SIEM is getting. We allow that. They can run reports. They can do everything that I'm doing here in front of you on the SIEM. But then they also have us as backup, so they don't have to stare at it 24 hours a day. They don't need to run the reports. They can ask us to do that. And they don't need to do things like, for example, we have dashboards here that were built out for you and allows you to dig into whatever you want. And we can have these dashboards go back days or weeks or months if you want to. So then you can see the trends, and you can have this. Some of our clients have this in their IT area, and it's like a SOC dashboard that their IT people can look at, and they can see what's going on. But then my team is alerting them on anything they really need to look into.
And I think that's important. You must have questions from customers about how long that data sits, because if they are receiving log information from a third-party software or something along those lines, they tend to not keep that log information very long. So if a week goes by and they only store 72 hours worth of data, they don't have the ability to go back and see what the issue was or what the anomalies occurred. So do you get asked that question often around just that retrieval piece? I know it sounds simple, but it actually can be very valuable for customers.
Yeah, so it depends. If we have, let's say, a cloud organization that we're pulling the data from via API, by default, Thrive keeps all data for 90 days. Now, we can keep it for as long as you want, but by default, that's what we do. But then, especially with Salesforce or whatnot, direct API connection makes it very easy. We're pulling data almost real time, and it makes it very easy for us to, once we have the data, it doesn't matter what happens to that third party's data. They can keep it or they can let it go, and it doesn't really matter to us.
Yeah, I'm glad to bring that up, because there's actually just the other day, Gary, and I had called Chip to tell him this rather quickly. I had someone I used to work with years ago reached out and said, hey, my company was just informed by the FBI that someone was in their network in the past 6 months. They got a letter from the FBI with some IP addresses, and this somebody I used to work with asked me, like, can you help? And maybe not the nicest way on the phone, he sort of chuckled and said, well, do you have any security logs? And they said, well, no, they thought it was too expensive to buy that kind of service from somebody. And it's like, well, I really would like to help. I do enjoy helping people, but again, because they chose not to make these investments before, they put themselves in a very, very difficult position. And it's hard to tell somebody when they're sort of starving like that for help that kind of hard for me to help you because you don't have any tools for me to help you with.
Right.
And we're seeing stuff like that quite a bit, unfortunately.
It's the worst scenario is when they come to you after they've already had a breach and they want you to fix it, but you can't do much because we don't have the information to, you know, to do much with.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
all right,
going on.
Keep going here. Yep.
Yep. So obviously we talked about dashboards. One of the, one of the areas that, we spoke about before were, this overview of incidents and, we also like to look at performance. That is anything that disk performance, memory, CPU, so we can see if there's a crypto miner machine that would, that, for example, is mining for Bitcoins. That was very popular a year and a half, 2 years ago. People would get on servers and they would mine Bitcoins from 1 in the morning till 5 in the morning. People wouldn't notice, but they'd move on. These things were mining and the only people would notice is if we're monitoring performance. So, but what I'm going to talk about is the area that my team lives in most often, and this is the Explorer tab. This Explorer tab, basically, I'm again looking in the last 2 hours, but everything that's happened in the last 2 hours in this demo environment of ours. So one of the things that's interesting is, so all these things we can take a look at, if we can let's take a look at an large outbound transfer outside my organization. It's going to Canada, and here I can go and I can dig into it. And if I really wanted to, I can actually see the raw event log and see exactly what's going on and what might be happening. Now, one of the things that's really, really interesting and kind of to go back full circle of what was going on before is when we get these alerts and anything that is, for us, a medium or high alert, it goes into ServiceNow automatically. So once we get some of these, maybe a sudden user login change or one of those type of alerts, they go into ServiceNow, and then ServiceNow, the team starts working in ServiceNow, and you as a customer can then log into ServiceNow and see what we're doing to rectify this event, right? And this allows us to do a lot more, especially with our clients that are also on platform within ServiceNow.
So Chip, we can really work together is what we're trying to get at here, right, Gary? So, we don't want there to be, sort of one side working on one thing, left hand, right hand. We really do want to work together. Sometimes the person on site at the customer or inside the customer's organization is the right person to run some of these security threats down. And that's really the sort of the second part here where we bring these things together. I know you and I talked a lot about co-management. Are you seeing a lot of interest in co-management as opposed to, provider customer? Do you see people struggling with that?
So it can be a touchy subject. It depends on, again, who we're having the conversation with. The CIO most definitely is interested in co-management, because if the team that is helping with the remediation and just overall relationship with an environment like this, they leave the business, then they don't have that tribal knowledge. The actual end users, what I always explain is that if you are looking at looking at this from a co-management standpoint where you still have shared root access, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you needed somebody on Chip's team to help you with something, or look into one of these alerts, they can do that. And that, once I kind of disarm them, the feeling that their job isn't going away, but they have that augmentation, that's where the conversation goes really well. We haven't seen complete outsource in this type of environment yet, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I think we're seeing a lot of customers saying, hey, I've got all these things going on, all these alarms and alerts going on. How do I consolidate this? But I still want to own it. But I'm okay if somebody else is going to help me. I think that's been more of the shift that we're seeing.
That's great. And actually, that's the type of thing we'd like to show here to just finish off, and that's showing some of this interaction in ServiceNow. So, Chip, can you give me an example of where you might work alongside, even if it's not necessarily here in our demo environment, if you just want to speak to it, maybe something around Office 365?
Yeah, so there's, for example, we do have a lot of Office 365 alerts because obviously we're connecting into that. That's a big area. If we have an Office 365 alert that either the person, the way they're logging in is a little bit odd, or they're logging in from a country that might be abnormal for us, we do try to find out, as we work with customers, if they have offices in certain locations or countries, we will whitelist those. But then we start going outside of it. If you're logging in from a different country, or a country that is, let's say, abnormal, we're going to alert you, or depending on the action you want, you might want us to lock down that account until we get in touch with a point of contact.
All right, great. So let me show this to you so we can kind of put all these pieces together that we've been talking about. So Chip, thanks for that SIEM demo. I want to jump here now into ServiceNow. Now, the big disclaimer is that I'm actually logged into ServiceNow as if I'm a customer that you work with, not necessarily one of a Thrive employee or a SOC engineer, which I know you're familiar with this kind of engagement. So I'd just like to walk the folks on the webinar through how this works, right? So Chip was just talking about a strange login pattern. So the SOC team now has highlighted that we have a sudden login increase from Bulgaria. Now, most people, that would be pretty odd to see a user logging into Office 365 from Bulgaria. Now, what I can see here is Chip's team, actually, the SOC team has this case. But, I know that nobody, as the person that works at the company, that nobody would be logging in from Bulgaria. And even if they are, I want to know about it. So right now, what I can do is click this button and say, assign to customer. That's me. I'm the customer. And now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, we checked it out. There's no one in Bulgaria for our company. And then the great thing I can do here is that as someone who's working with the team, I can actually put in my notes here for the SOC team, and we can work together right in ServiceNow. And then I can actually send this back to Thrive. So I say, please block this country, right? So this is pretty cool. There aren't a lot of platforms that you can do this on. So this is all integrated into the SIEM, and I've added a note. And now I'm actually going to send this right back to the Security Operations Center. And now you can see my fields are locked out. So this is just a very, very small example of what you can do with ServiceNow. Obviously, we showed you that giant whiteboard at the beginning, that eye chart. So we wanted to kind of help people understand, well, what does it look like and what can I do with it? Now, Chip, that context that I just gave you back, I'm assuming that's pretty helpful for your operators, correct?
It's extremely helpful, and it speeds up to the path of resolution, because we're working with the customer directly, and we can sign tasks back and forth instead of going, sending email chains with who knows doing what. By assigning to the customer, we know the customer has it. It's on their plate. Once they sign it to Thrive, we get notified. We start working on it. It makes it so much faster and so much easier.
Yes, I'm glad we got an opportunity to show ServiceNow. Gary, just on the ServiceNow side, I think if there was any advice for people as far as where to get started in this world, everyone's talking about security. ServiceNow is something people are starting to really talk about. Are there any specific use cases on the ServiceNow side that you've run across that maybe you could tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and I use this technology myself, but I've seen a couple instances where customers say, we really like Slack, we do troubleshooting back and forth, but this is a better option for us here because it's documented, it's tracked. I can go outside of the organization. Plus, the end customer feels that additional layer of security between the ServiceNow instances is there. Not that Slack doesn't have that, but I think just the ability of just focusing singularly here to solve these problems, that's been one of the most interesting and I think easier use cases is just getting something in there very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Speed and a real solid resolution is what we're very much interested in, right? As little back and forth as possible. Let's isolate the problem and let's get it solved. So, Gary, I really want to appreciate you taking the time here. I know we want to get some sort of additional next steps here as far as if people have questions. Guys, is there anything else that you want to discuss here today?
No, I'm just very excited that we got given the opportunity to show, what the SIEM with ServiceNow can really, really be a game changer out in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I would just great.
Yeah, I would just add that this is a great option for customers that want to get into this, but also that have the ability to work with a partner that has seen a lot of different areas that this can play into. I think it just goes a long way. Michael, Chip, thank you so much for today's presentation, and we really value your time. So I thank you again for going through the demo, the definitions, and kind of the use cases today. If anyone wants to learn more or even do an assessment similar to what we saw on the whiteboard and take that whiteboard into practice with the technology, reach out to myself, Gary Sloper, here at Macronet Services. It's just Gary@macronetservices.com. We'll engage the Thrive team. Love to whiteboard and have a further discussion and see if we can help you. So thank you again. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.